A couple set off on their anniversary hunting trip into the Michigan wilderness, but they never returned, vanishing without a trace into the vast forest. Then 2 years later, their dog suddenly shows up on the porch, injured, emaciated, and carrying a secret that would trigger a chain of events, exposing an unthinkable nightmare. Elizabeth Spence pushed herself up from her knees, wincing as her arthritic joints protested the movement. The Michigan sun beat down on her weathered hands as she pulled another weed from around her tomato plants at 72. The garden work seemed to get harder each year, but she'd be damned if she'd let the weeds take over, not after all the work she'd put into this patch of earth over the decades. Just a few more, she muttered to herself, eyeing the row of vegetables that still needed attention. But the timer she'd set in the kitchen began its insistent beeping, reminding her of the pot roast simmering on the stove. With a grunt of effort, she leveraged herself to her feet, one hand pressed against her lower back. The walk to the house seemed longer than it used to. Each step up the wooden porch stairs sent a twinge through her knees. She'd been putting off this garden work for weeks, but with Niels busy at his job and Dean, she stopped that thought before it could fully form. 2 years. 2 years since Dean and his wife Jocelyn had gone hunting and never come back. Elizabeth reached for the screen door handle, already thinking about the carrots she needed to add to the roast when movement on the porch caught her eye. She turned, expecting maybe a raccoon or stray cat. The trowel clattered from her nerveless fingers. There, lying on the worn wooden boards of her porch, was a dog, but not just any dog. Even through the matted, filthy fur and the shocking thinness of his body, she recognized him instantly. Rufus, Dean's Irish wolfhound. Elizabeth stumbled backward, her hand flying to her chest, where her heart had begun a wild, painful rhythm. "No," she whispered, blinking hard. "No, it can't be." The dog lifted his head weakly at the sound of her voice. One of his front legs was wrapped in what looked like a makeshift bandage, stained and filthy. His ribs showed starkly through his coat, and there was a raw, infected wound on his forehead. But those eyes, those gentle brown eyes that had always looked at Dean with such devotion, they were unmistakably Rufus's. "Oh my God," Elizabeth gasped, her legs threatening to give out. She gripped the porch railing, unable to look away from the impossible sight before her. 2 years. The dog had been missing for 2 years. Along with Dean and Jocelyn, the search parties had found nothing, no bodies, no gear, no trace of them or Rufus in those vast Michigan woods. With shaking hands, she fumbled for her phone in her pocket, nearly dropping it twice before managing to dial 911 911. "What's your emergency?" "This is Elizabeth Spence." She managed her voice barely above a whisper. I need officers at my house immediately. The dog, my son's dog, just showed up. My son, who's been missing for 2 years." "Ma'am, can you repeat that?" "Dean Spencer's dog," she said more firmly, though her voice still shook. "My son is agent Dean Spence. He went missing 2 years ago with his wife Jocelyn while hunting their dog. Just appeared on my porch. He's injured badly. Please send someone now." "Units are on their way, Mrs. Spence." "Are you safe? Is anyone else?" "They're just me and the dog. He can barely move." "Oh God, what does this mean? Where's my son?" "Stay on the line with me, ma'am. Officers will be there shortly." Elizabeth sank down onto the porch steps, keeping her eyes on Rufus. The dog's tail gave a weak thump against the boards, as if he recognized her too. She wanted to go to him, to comfort him, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. All she could do was stare and whisper, "Where's Dean? Boy, where's my son?" The wail of sirens grew louder, and within minutes 2 patrol cars pulled into her driveway. Officers Morrison and Bradley. She recognized them both. They'd been part of the initial search when Dean disappeared. "Mrs. Spence," Officer Morrison said gently, approaching slowly. His eyes widened when he saw the dog. "Jesus, is that really?" "It's Rufus," Elizabeth confirmed, tears streaming down her face. "Now it's Dean's dog." Officer Bradley was already on his radio, calling for additional units and a veterinarian. Morrison knelt beside the dog, careful not to startle him. "Hey there, boy, you've had a rough time, haven't you?" He looked up at Elizabeth. "We need to get him medical attention immediately. And we'll need to take you to the station, Mrs. Spence. The detectives will want to speak with you right away. But what about searching? If Rufus is alive, maybe." "Dean will handle everything," Morrison assured her. "Let's focus on getting you and the dog somewhere safe first." More vehicles arrived. An animal control van with a veterinarian, 2 more patrol cars, and an unmarked detective's vehicle. Elizabeth watched in a daze as the vet, a young woman with gentle hands, carefully examined Rufus where he lay. "Severe malnutrition, dehydration," the vet murmured. "This wound on his head is infected. The leg, someone tried to bandage this, but it's been a while. We need to get him to the clinic immediately." They loaded Rufus onto a special stretcher, the dog whimpering softly but too weak to resist. Elizabeth found herself in the back of Officer Morrison's patrol car heading to the station. Her mind raced with questions. How had Rufus survived 2 years in the wilderness? Who had bandaged his leg? And most importantly, what had happened to Dean and Joe's line? The familiar building of the police station came into view, but it felt surreal, like she was watching someone else's life unfold. Officers held doors for her, guided her to a comfortable interview room, not the stark interrogation rooms she'd seen on TV, but a softer space with padded chairs and a coffee maker in the corner. "Mrs. Spence, I'm Detective Walsh," a woman in her 40s introduced herself. "I know this must be overwhelming. Can I get you some water, coffee?" "Where's the dog?" Elizabeth asked. "I need to know he's being taken care of. Dr. Hernandez from the emergency veterinary clinic is with him now. She'll update us as soon as she can. Right now, I need you to tell me exactly what happened." More people filed in detectives she recognized from Dean's department at the de-uniformed officers who'd known her son. The small room grew crowded with concerned faces. Elizabeth recounted finding Rufus, her voice growing steadier as she spoke. The detectives took notes, asked careful questions. When did she last see the dog? Before today. What was his condition then? Had she noticed anything unusual around her property? Recently, the bandage on his leg, Detective Walsh said thoughtfully. "That's not something a dog could do to himself. Someone helped him, then someone's seen him." Elizabeth said urgently, "Someone knows something. We're already mobilizing search teams." Another detective assured her, "We'll start from your property and work outward, follow any trail the dog might have left." Dr. Hernandez arrived, then still in her scrubs. "He's stable," she announced, and Elizabeth sagged with relief. "Sedated for now, while we treat his wounds and run some tests. He's been through hell, sorry for the language, but he's a fighter." Someone definitely provided medical care at some point though. "Not recently. That bandage is at least a few weeks old. When can I see him?" Elizabeth asked. "Let's give him a few hours to rest. I'll bring him to you as soon as he's ready." The vet paused. "Mrs. Spence, that's one tough dog. Whatever happened out there, he fought to make it back." Elizabeth nodded. Fresh tears spilling over. Rufus had made it back, but where was her son? The interview room at the station had grown warm. With so many bodies packed inside, Elizabeth sat at the center of it all, fielding questions from the growing group of officers and detectives. Word had spread quickly through the department. Dean Spence's dog had returned after 2 years. "Mrs. Spence, think carefully." Detective Walsh pressed gently. "In the days before Dean and Jocelyn went hunting, did he mention anything unusual? Any concerns about his work, threats he'd received?" Elizabeth shook her head. Slowly, "Nothing. He was excited about the trip. They'd been planning it for months. Their anniversary hunting trip," he said. "The woods up north were perfect this time of year for deer." The door opened and 3 more officers entered, including Lieutenant Marcus Hayes from the D. Elizabeth recognized him from department functions she'd attended with Dean. Elizabeth Hayes said, his face grave. "I'm sorry you're going through this. We're going to do everything we can to find answers." He turned to the others. "I've got our tech team pulling all of Dean's case files from the 2 months before he disappeared. If someone targeted him, there might be a connection." Another officer, one Elizabeth didn't recognize, stepped forward. He was younger, maybe mid-30s, with sharp blue eyes and close-cropped sandy hair. "Mrs. Spence, I'm Officer Dmitry Volkov. I worked a few joint operations with Dean. He's a good man." The conversation continued, theories flying back and forth. Elizabeth's head began to pound. She'd been at the station for over 3 hours now, and the adrenaline that had carried her through the initial shock was wearing off. Her arthritis was flaring badly, joints stiffening from sitting in the same position. "I think Mrs. Spence has had enough for now," Officer Vulov said suddenly, noticing her discomfort. "Perhaps someone should take her home. She needs rest, and we need to coordinate the search teams anyway." Detective Walsh nodded. "He's right. Elizabeth will continue working. Here, is there someone we can call to stay with you, my other son?" "Niels, but he's at work in Detroit. It'll take him a few hours to get here." "I can drive you home, Officer Volkov. Make sure you're settled safely. This has been a tremendous shock." Elizabeth accepted. Gratefully, her own car was still at home, and she wasn't sure she could manage the drive anyway, with her hands shaking. As they prepared to leave, Dr. Hernandez called with an update. "Rufus is stable, but still sedated. I want to monitor him for a few more hours. Make sure there are no complications from the treatment. Would it be all right if I brought him to your home this evening? I'd like to check his response when he wakes up, fully see how he does in familiar surroundings." "Yes, please," Elizabeth said immediately. He should be home. The drive back to her house felt surreal. Officer Vulov kept up a gentle stream of conversation, asking about her garden, her years in the community. He seemed genuinely kind, helping her from the car when they arrived, making sure she had her keys. "The search teams will be working through the night," he assured her as they walked to her door. "Every available officer is being called in. We'll find answers." Mrs. Spence, inside Elizabeth, sank into her favorite armchair, the one where she used to sit and watch Dean and Niels play as boys. Officer Vulov checked the windows, the back door, making sure everything was secure. "Would you like me to wait until your son arrives?" he offered. "No, you've been very kind. I'll be fine." She paused. "Officer Vulov, do you really think could Dean still be alive?" Something flickered across his face. Concern, sympathy. It was gone before she could identify it. If anyone could survive out there, it would be Dean. He knew those woods better than most. The sound of a car in the driveway interrupted them. Elizabeth looked out to see Niles's pickup truck pulling in at speed. Gravel spraying. Her younger son was out of the vehicle before it had fully stopped, rushing toward the house. "Mom." Niels burst through the door, immediately wrapping her in a careful hug. At 38, he was the opposite of his older brother in many ways. Where Dean was calculated and methodical, Niels was impulsive and emotional. "I'm sorry I couldn't get here sooner. Traffic was a nightmare, and my boss was being a complete..." He noticed Officer Vulov and stopped. "Sorry. I'm Niels Spence, Officer Dmitry Vulov." They shook hands. "I was just making sure your mother got home safely." "Is it true Rufus really came back?" "He's at the vet clinic," Elizabeth explained. "Dr. Hernandez will bring him home soon. He's in bad shape, but alive." Niels ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his father that Elizabeth's heart clenched. "Jesus, 2 years. How is that even possible?" "That's what we're trying to determine, officer," Volkov said. "I should get back to the station, help coordinate the search efforts." He turned to Elizabeth. "You have my card. Call if you need anything, or remember any details that might help." "Thank you for driving me home," Elizabeth said. "You've been very kind." Vulov was just stepping off the porch when another vehicle turned into the driveway, a van with emergency veterinary services emblazoned on the side. Dr. Hernandez was behind the wheel. Perfect timing, the vet called out, climbing from the van. He's starting to wake up. I'll need help getting him inside, officer. Vulov immediately turned back. I'll help. They opened the van's rear doors to reveal Rufus on a special cushioned stretcher. The dog's eyes were open, but still glazed from sedation. His head lifted slightly at the sound of voices. Easy boy, Dr. Hernandez soothed. Let's get you. The transformation was instantaneous the moment Rufus' gaze landed on Officer Vulov. The dog exploded into motion. Despite his weakened state and the sedation still in his system, he lunged upward, a deep growl rumbling from his chest. His lips pulled back, showing teeth, and he barked with a ferocity that made everyone step back. Whoa! Niels exclaimed, moving protectively in front of his mother. Rufus continued to bark and snarl, his entire focus on Officer Volkov, who had taken several steps backward, hands raised. It's okay, Vulov said, though Elizabeth noticed he'd gone pale. I probably smelled like my K9 unit. Duke was in my patrol car all morning. Dogs can be territorial about that. But Rufus wasn't backing down, despite Dr. Hernandez's attempts to calm him. He continued to growl, hackles raised eyes, never leaving the officer. Maybe you should go, Niels suggested. We can handle it from here. Vulov nodded, attempting a laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. Yeah, probably best. Duke's a German shepherd, very different energy from a wolfhound. Rufus probably thinks I'm bringing competition into his territory. He backed toward his patrol car. I'll check in tomorrow, make sure everything's okay. Only after the patrol car had pulled away did Rufus begin to calm, though he kept looking toward the road, a low rumble still in his throat. That was strange. Dr. Hernandez mused. In my experience, dogs don't usually react that strongly to just a scent, especially not in Rufus's condition. Well, let's get him inside. The vet said he needs rest, and I want to monitor him for a few more hours. Mrs. Spence, do you still have his bed? Familiar items will help. Everything's just as they left it, Elizabeth said softly. I couldn't bear to change anything as they carefully carried Rufus into the house. Elizabeth couldn't shake the image of the dog's reaction to Officer Volkov. In all the years Rufus had been part of their family, she'd never seen him act that aggressive toward anyone. Dr. Hernandez had left an hour ago, satisfied that Rufus was stable enough to remain in Elizabeth's care. The dog now lay on his old bed in the corner of the living room, the same spot where he'd always kept watch when Dean and Joseline visited. His breathing was steady but labored, ribs visible with each rise and fall of his chest. Neil sat across from his mother at the kitchen table, 2 cups of coffee growing cold between them. The familiar ritual of sharing coffee felt strange under these circumstances. The same table where they'd gathered for countless family meals, now heavy with unspoken fears. He loved that dog more than anything, Neil said, quietly watching Rufus sleep. Remember when he first brought him home? Joseline was so mad you didn't tell me he'd be the size of a small horse. Elizabeth managed a weak smile, but she fell in love with him just as fast. Used to sneak him treats when she thought Dean wasn't looking. Dean always knew. Niels added he'd pretend he didn't see. They lapsed into silence. Elizabeth's arthritis was acting up worse than usual, stress, making her joints feel like they were full of ground glass. She rubbed her swollen knuckles, absently mummed that reaction to the officer earlier. Neil started. I know it was strange. Dean always said Rufus could read people better than any person could remember that time with the contractor who tried to overcharge them for the deck repair. Rufus wouldn't let the guy in the house, and Dean was right not to trust him, Elizabeth recalled. Found out later he'd been scamming elderly homeowners all over the county. The phone rang, startling them. Both Elizabeth's heart jumped. Every call now carried the weight of possibility. She answered. With trembling fingers, Mrs. Spence, this is Detective Walsh. I wanted to give you an update on our search efforts. Yes, Elizabeth put the phone on speaker, so Niels could hear. We've had teams in the forest since this afternoon. We were able to locate what we believe are Rufus tracks leading from the deeper woods toward populated areas. The canine units followed the trail for several miles, and Niels leaned forward. Walsh's voice was carefully neutral. The trail is old, Mrs. Spence, days, maybe weeks. It seems to meander significantly, the pattern you'd expect from an animal foraging, hunting, surviving on its own. We lost it at several stream crossings, but someone bandaged his leg. Elizabeth protested. Someone helped him. Yes, that's unusual. We're exploring the possibility that maybe a hunter or hiker came across him at some point and provided basic first aid. But honestly, Mrs. Spence, that bandage is crude. It could have been there for quite some time in this wilderness. It's not uncommon for people to help injured animals. They come across without reporting it. What are you saying? Niels's voice had an edge to it. Detective Walsh sighed audibly. Based on what we're seeing, the dog's condition, the meandering trail, the time frame, our working theory is that Rufus has been surviving in the wilderness for the past 2 years. Dogs are remarkably adaptable, especially a breed as hearty as an Irish wolfhound. He would have been able to hunt small game, find water. Sources, you think my son is dead. Elizabeth's words were flat, not a question, Mrs. Spence. I know this isn't what you want to hear, but 2 years in those woods with no confirmed sightings, no evidence of camps or shelters beyond what we found in the initial searches. The most likely scenario is that Dean and Jocelyn encountered some kind of accident, a fall perhaps, or wildlife. The dog survived because, well, because he's a dog. They're built for survival in ways humans aren't. That's Neil snapped. My brother was D. He was trained for survival situations. He knew those woods like the back of his hand. I understand your frustration. No, you don't. You're writing them off based on a few hours of searching and some dog tracks, Mr. Spence. We're not writing anyone off. The search will continue. We'll have teams out there for days, maybe weeks. We'll search every cave, every ravine, every possible shelter. But I wanted to be honest with you about what we're finding so far. Elizabeth closed her eyes. Thank you for the update, Detective. We'll call immediately if anything changes. Try to get some rest. After she hung up, Neil slammed his fist on the table. They're giving up already, just like 2 years ago. They searched for months. Back then, Elizabeth reminded him gently, not good enough. Dean wouldn't just die out there, and even if something happened, there would be evidence. Bodies don't just disappear. Animals. Elizabeth couldn't finish the sentence. No, Neil stood abruptly. I don't accept that. Look at Rufus. He made it back. He found his way home. After 2 years, that dog wouldn't leave. Dean, unless he paused, his anger deflating slightly, unless